Welcome back to episode 8 of the Dr. Beau Show.
Tip off. Early morning sunlight exposure on your eyes and your skin a little bit too helps depress the surge of cortisol that helps wake us up in the morning, but it also helps kick off melatonin when we go to bed at night. So first thing in the morning, when you're enjoying your glass of water, get outside. Don't stare directly into the sun, but get about 5 minutes of indirect sun exposure. Another tip off of the same vein, blue light is one of the main lights emitted out of the spectrum of the sun. Blue light blocking glasses are very big nowadays. I use them at night, but one thing you should think about is don't use them during the day. We think if we're in an office all day, we need them. You may not, that's normal, but after 3 p.m., maybe kick them on.
Just a quick reminder, this is now on Apple Podcasts, so it is on YouTube. It's in podcast format, and you can find both of those actually at chirofarm.com and just search for the Dr. Beau Show or / Dr. Beau Show. I'm going to get started today with a quote from a book I've been reading for a little bit now, Travels with Charley in Search of America by John Steinbeck. Really good book. It's a narrative story of travels that Steinbeck took a little bit later in life, and I just want to read a little excerpt from that because I think it's extremely fitting for our time and place right now. Here in Maine, a great many were French Canadians who came over the border for the harvest season. It occurs to me that, just as the Carthaginians hired mercenaries to do their fighting for them, we Americans bring in mercenaries to do our hard and humble work. I hope we may not be overwhelmed one day by peoples not too proud or too lazy or too soft to bend to the earth and pick up the things we eat. I'm not going to really throw any commentary in on that, but I believe that to be extremely apropos to our political, economic, and even civil issues that are going on right now. So I highly encourage this. Obviously, I didn't realize how many books Steinbeck had written. In the prologue here, it gives a little breakdown, just a ton of books, and also a good thing to pull out of this, seeing how many books that Steinbeck wrote. When we look back on somebody who's famous, we're always going to say, oh, all of his works were awesome, or all of her works were great. But there are only like 2 or 3 standouts, East of Eden, of Mice and Men. Like a couple really big books, and then, we see this following. So I see that as the Michael Jordan quote, you're going to miss all the shots you don't take. So keep doing what you need to do to keep going out there and putting more time in. I was also listening to a podcast. We'll skip ahead to what I'm listening to. I was listening to the Rich Roll podcast with, I believe it's James Altucher. And James has written quite a few books. But he brought up this idea of how, obviously I think there's been holes poked in the idea of the 10,000 hour rule to mastery. And he's written a book called Skip the Line where he's talking about that. But he also brought up the idea, his novel idea of 10,000 experiments to mastery, and that you always have to be trying, and that the people who become masters quicker than the 10,000 hour rule would maybe allow, try and fail. But it's not just try and fail. Nowadays, failure gets over glamorized as like, yeah, my failure set me up for my biggest win. But you still have to learn, and then you have to improve, which is something that John Maxwell talks a lot about in his podcast, of the fact that we have to go through these steps of failing, realizing what happened, improving, and then you grow, and then that's how you actually continue to grow throughout life, is that process continually happening over and over. So what else am I listening to since we're on that topic? Tyler Childers. So this is I guess if we had to define him as a country folk bluegrass rock artist. I'm just loving all of his albums. Some of the songs that I'm a big fan of right now are Shake the Frost, Feathered Indians. One of my favorites is White House Road. And if you're going to listen to that one, you have to listen to the Our Vinyl Sessions one. That's one that I learned to play. I do a little picking and grinning. And it's just a really good song in my opinion. What am I watching? ESPN has been hitting it hard during these times of trying to increase ratings. So they've come out with some really good documentaries. Obviously, we talked about The Last Dance on here, but now we've seen Lance Armstrong. It's just called Lance, the 30 for 30 on him. Really good documentary. Some stuff that I didn't know about him that was interesting. That he was such a stud triathlete at such a young age, like 15, 16 years old. He was one of the top in the world. And then he kind of branched off into cycling after that. And then if we look at another one that I actually just watched last night, or actually 2 nights ago as this comes out, is the Bruce Lee 30 for 30. And I think that's called Be Water. Both really good films, but there are a couple points I wanted to pull out of these. And maybe this is the case with any star or stud athlete or visionary. Both of these people, regardless of their flaws or, even their best attributes, are unequivocally who they are. They I think everybody that's dealt with Lance Armstrong knows who he is, and some people think he's an asshole. That's fine. If you dealt with Bruce Lee, what you heard in that documentary over and over is that he was just, the energy that surrounded him filled the room, but also he got called an asshole a couple times. So these people they were very comfortable in their own skin. And somebody actually says this in the Bruce Lee documentary that most stars are so comfortable within their skin that it just allows them to exude whatever they're trying to do and accomplish their goal that much easier. The other thing that I really liked about this was in the Bruce Lee documentary, it talked about how he was always trying to bridge the gap between East and West, and between martial arts and Hollywood, and between the physicality of martial arts and the philosophy of it. And I'm a board member of Rehab to Performance, or R2P, and bridging the gap is literally our motto or tagline. And I like a tagline like any that can go across the subject matter that we're focused on. And I think right now we know that we maybe need help bridging the gap in terms of racial inequality, and bridging the gap in terms of allowing knowledge that's based on science to pervade versus opinion and fear-mongering. But that's one of my goals in here, is to bridge the gap from what we would say is rehab to performance, but bridge the gap really from moving from getting people out of pain to realizing that optimizing their health is one of the best things they can do for every part of their life. It truly is an investment. And the more we can focus on that in here and figure out how do we get people that may not be aware that their health is such a great asset, or that have no clue how to attack that, that's what we try to do in bridging the gap in the farm. Q&A. So this is a bit of a specific Q&A. I'll touch on it very quickly, but I got asked about rib tip syndrome. So there's very few published articles on this, and basically what this is pain at, in particular, the false ribs or the floating ribs, 11 and 12, and kind of an impingement that can occur between the pelvic crust and those ribs, which can be set off due to trauma, right? Taking a hard blow or a hard fall where you get compression and then you get a bony contusion on the costal cartilage portion of the rib. So that's going to be a hard one to offset when there's actual trauma. And the question was, well, how do you create more space? What are the ideas around this? And what is the proper amount of pelvic space? I hate to tell you, even though we talk about anatomical norms and maybe there should be a hand width or 3 fingers width in between the top of the pelvic crust or the ilium and the lowest rib, everybody's different. And then if you throw in even, asymmetries within that single person, that one side's going to be a little bit different than the other due to possible curvatures or leg length or whatever it is, we shouldn't get so hopped up on what anatomical norms are. You need to know them at their bare bones if you're going to be a clinician, so you know what to look for that's completely out of the norm. But the other part of this question was, how do you increase space there? Well, part of this is anatomy. Let's say I have severe scoliosis. I just had a woman that I was working with the other day that has a right lumbar scoliotic curve. And I mean, she's beyond our typical age of progression, right? Usually we see females will progress up to the age of 25. If you're fairly healthy, that progression halts for the most part, and maybe it starts to speed back up when we get into our later years with sarcopenia and osteopenia and things like that occurring. But let's say I have that scoliotic curve. Well, one side's going to be different than the other. So we can do a lot for creating axial extension or uprighting through the spine. We in my clinic would use, proper intra-abdominal pressure, proper stabilization, things like DNS. From a training perspective, carries, all right, unilateral suitcase carries, axial loading, squatting, deadlifting, things like that are huge. And then also, I don't think we realize how much bounding and plyometrics require axial uprighting and basically skeletal stability. So I wouldn't be too worried about creating space if somebody lacks stabilization or pressurization on one side, and then they're having pain due to that. That's the first thing we'd work on is, can they appropriately pressurize low within the abdomen between the thoracic diaphragm and the pelvic floor, and hang on to that ability to pressurize under duress, under load, under different movements and shapes. So I hope that answers the question. So the main topic for today is surrounding a class that I had to take this week. And I say had to. I didn't have to take the class. I took a continuing education class that was a live Zoom broadcast, like a lot of things are right now due to coronavirus. And this was a 12-hour class. So first of all, you're signing up for 12 hours in front of a computer, which is never the most fun thing in the world, even with the best speaker. And I'm not going to beat up this class too much, but let me just say this. The level of information that was put out by this class was despicable, and it made me frankly embarrassed to be in the profession with this person. And it also at the same time is extremely frustrating that this person is teaching and is somewhat seen as on a different level, and that the information that was being perpetuated was completely confirmation biasing position. And what do I mean by that? This person was extremely smart, cited articles, had been doing this for far more years than me. So I do have to pay homage to the fact that they've been in the game for longer than me. But I have said this before, time does not equal experience. Experience is actually kind of like the 10,000 hour rule, right? It's deliberate practice. It's actually unconfirming your biases constantly, trying to prove yourself wrong, trying to work on your weaknesses, and trying to always think about, is what I'm doing, can it fall back against the principles of basic sciences like anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, physics, right? Like, do these things make sense that I'm doing? Now, that being said, there is a difference between evidence-based and evidence-led. And any good clinician is not evidence-based. I saw a stat the other day, there's about a 17-year gap between when evidence comes out and those practices actually can be put into place clinically due to the repeatability of experiments, the fact that we need to get that data published, that we need to comb through the data, maybe we need it on large populations. So if we were completely evidence-based, we'd always be behind the curve, and that's not my goal in practice and not for my patients. Evidence-led is where we take that experience where we're deliberately thinking about the things that are in the literature, but then also the things that we see in the clinic, which is what for a long time has been valued far more than the literature. The literature was supposed to be guiding lights toward what could we try in clinic. And then as we try, we give more ideas on how to tweak the experiments, on how to help the laboratory-based scientists hone these rather than letting the experiment suss out what we're 100% doing. Now, that's a give and a take all the time. But there's a big difference between taking evidence and then shutting out other evidence and then completely creating an opinion or a false methodology that's not based on science, that is completely being propped up on your own suppositions about things. And this was confirmed numerous times because this person kept quoting, well, my theory is as valid as anybody's theory. Well, yeah, I agree there's a lot of theories out there, but the validity of your theory shouldn't be propped up by the fact that other people have theories. It should be propped up by the fact that you're basing it on science and literature and your experience and things that have existed, and not that you can't explain it when we start asking science-based questions. And we're not saying literature-based questions. That's a big thing that I see happen nowadays, is that we say, well, this research article shows that that's not true, or this research article shows that it is true. That's all good and well, but what is research doing? It's taking basic science or proposed pieces of basic science in practice settings for conservative musculoskeletal care and saying, does this make sense? Can we suss this out in an experiment? But then if we have somebody doing something or teaching something that when we put it up against the filter of science, it doesn't ring true, it doesn't hold up, what are we doing letting these people teach new clinicians? Like, there were clinicians in this class that were eating this stuff up. And there was a part of it that was good, but there was 90% of it that was just completely false. I'm not saying that this is a bad person. I don't want you to have a misunderstanding here. But we have to do better as a profession. We have to do better as clinicians. We have to do better as healthcare workers to constantly unconfirm our own biases with new information and think about what we're doing. And that is hard. I was just having the conversation with our other clinicians today that it would be so much easier if I was under the mindset that if I just stuck a needle into a certain point and only adjusted somebody, that everything like was fixed. And that was a term that was used a lot this weekend, was fixed, which I have a problem with that too. But it's not that easy. Like, we're complex beings. How much more is there to us that we don't understand, and the things that we are trying to understand are even misunderstood. So we're just doing our best to like muddle through this. So what gets dangerous is when we decide that we've gone far enough down the path, we're going to turn our flashlight off and just start like kind of hacking through the weeds with whatever knowledge we have. Like it's not progressing anybody. Now, if somebody says they get results with the stuff they're doing, I'm not going to deny that that's the case, but then we have to ask, well, is that a really strong therapeutic partnership? Are you a really good salesman? Is there a big placebo effect? Like, those are all real things. I get it. But then if we're going to try to create this repeatability that you're going to go teach people and now they don't have the same success that you do because they don't have your charisma or something. And then you say, well, and this was also quoted from the class, that I don't teach a certain profession this thing because they don't have the skills needed to do this thing. Oh, man, why can't we teach them the skills? What's wrong with that? Like, it's a broken equation already. So I had mentioned earlier in this video that I'm on the board with Rehab to Performance, and our mission is bridging the gap. But really the mission of R2P is to raise the level of education out there, whether that's in seminars or in our university settings, or just in our own offices, of what we're talking about and what we're telling our patients, how we're educating them. Because that's really, if we wanted to get on a soapbox and talk to somebody, it would be our patients, so we have more patients coming in. But then realize that we're creating the market that we operate in. This market exists because we've told people that it's a certain way. That's why right now we're still, a lot of us that are in this rehab model are fighting I want to come in and get fixed. I want to come in and get adjusted and that fix everything. Well, there's a reason that you're seeking out other care and that you haven't been fixed yet after your, year-long treatment plan or your $2,700 payment plan. So our goal with R2P is to raise that whole tide so we get the level of education and information out there, not to an appropriate level that I believe in. That's the completely wrong way to look at this. That we're challenging constantly that, hey, are we thinking the right way? Is what we're doing efficacious and practically and principally based? Now, what is my mission in my clinic? My mission in my clinic is to be a person that is very much evidence-led. And I want to be up to date on science, but at the same time, I don't want to be chained by the things we don't know. And anybody who's out there that's reading literature that says something is so, right? We do this because of that. That's not how this works. I see people all the time that are very well-read, much more well-read than me in science literature within our field and outside of our field. Just because even 20 articles say something, we have to get into the whole conversation of like, how are these experiments done? What were the variables at hand? Was it a good study? How large was the population base? Who funded the study? Has this been put into clinical practice in a bunch of different settings with different practitioners? Like, there's so much stuff at hand here that take what's out there and develop your own ideas, but always throw it back against science. And I guess an example of this would be, let's just take chiropractic and subluxation. The fact that over the last more than a century, we've kind of figured out that, hey, maybe we have better ways to explain this stuff that we called vital flow or innate. And we can explain it with neurology and physiology, and that maybe, hey, we've figured out through studies that bones don't move back into a certain place and don't change position after adjustment or multiple adjustments, and that maybe we're restoring function and that neurology changes due to that function, and then we have less pain due to improved function. Like, you can still adjust people even though we don't completely understand some of the things that happen, right? People still have improved visceral function from an adjustment, and there's not, just ironclad data on that. Now, should you tell people that you're going to fix said GI issue with an adjustment? I don't think so. But if it's a innocent bystander of care, right? It's benign palliative care, and you're not out there, hanging your shingle on the fact that you're fixing visceral organ issues with your Merrick chart adjusting. Man, if they can go to the bathroom better after you adjust them because you're working on low back pain, awesome. If you do visceral manipulation to help them, and we can suss that out, perfect. But like, we can't take our own ideas and run with that to the point where now we're selling people and teaching people and having people pay me money to hear my opinions. That gets really dangerous, and in my opinion, takes us back in time. It's super archaic. So again, my mission is to be evidence-led, to be at the forefront of trying to help people, not at the forefront so I can be fancy and teach people my thing. If I'm going to teach a class, it's only for the purpose of, hey, we need more of this good information out there and more minds thinking about it so we can come back and have basically tighter feedback loops within our own professional field, within our clinicians that are out there doing this. So then we can have other people say, hey, Beau, I know you talked about this. I don't know if that's quite so. Have you thought about it like this? Man, I haven't. Thank you so much. Or, man, what you're talking about does not ring true whatsoever. Like, why are we doing this? Like, we should be able to have these conversations. And last thing I'll touch on before I get off this is, I've always used the example with our interns and our clinicians in here that it's very interesting if you go to a standard medical conference. Like, I used to attend medical conferences at Andrews, sports medicine. When you go into a medical conference, especially if you're at a very big one, it's usually somebody presenting research or presenting case studies, and then everybody has input and everybody has opinions, and they may be strong opinions, but they're all coming from a place of evidence and research and experience. When you go to a typical, whatever you want to call it, functional rehab, chiropractic, PT seminar, there's Andrew Espino was just talking about this the other day, the different types of seminar attendees, right? The person that just sits there and listens, the happy kind of conference goer, seminar goer. The person that's just itching to raise their hand and conflict anything you say at any point. And then the person that just wants to kind of add their 2 cents of like, yeah, I do this. This is how I get people better, right? So their own little like magic that happens. I don't understand why we can't go to a conference and say, man, I thought the literature said this. Can we talk about that? Hey, in my experience, this thing worked. I don't know if that's what that's the same thing you're saying. Is that different? Like, it's very much like we're all operating from our own individual biases and opinions. And we go to these seminars with those, and then we either want to hold on to them or not learn at all. And I'm not saying everybody, but we see a lot of these people, like, we need to all, should be a rule. You go into a seminar, it's like you just open your mind and you're like, I'm going to be open, but then at the same time, I don't know who said the quote, you want your mind to be open, but not so much that your brain falls out, right? So we want to be able to question and think and analytically think, right? Like, does this make sense what I'm being told? One more reminder before I get off here, the age of movement, 1 to 2 years. It's really 1 to 2 years. It's not 2 years. It's in that realm. So 12 to 24 months. Maybe I should have put that since we count months. The new blog is out. So check that out on chirofarm.com /toddlers, I believe. And again, that's a series. This is part 4. I'm going through I started in utero. I'm going to go all the way to senescence or death on what do we expect at different parts of our life, of how we should move, what to expect, what should we be working on, how to improve certain things. This is a blog series I'm going to be doing through the end of the year, and then I'm going to package it together and I'm going to release it as a book, and it'll be expounded upon within the book. And I'd love to hear people's input. If you have questions, you can always let me know, whether it's about the blog, about something on the show. If you want to have your question featured in here on the Q&A section, you can always get a hold of me at Dr. Beau Beard on all social media, or drbeaubeard@gmail.com. I hope you guys learned something, in this video that makes you better than before. See you.